Hello, and welcome back to this bare bones conversations with myself, Corey Hess. Um, Today, I'm really lucky to have Elijah Zupancic. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with me today, I've gotten to know Elijah over the last year. He's become a really close friend and person I can depend on. And he's got a really interesting story, a little bit different than mine, a little different flavor. And that's part of why I wanted to bring him on and, yeah, and kind of share that flavor. So welcome, Elijah.
It's an honor to be here.
Oh, great, great. Um, so, truth be told, I know Elijah partly through my the work I've been doing online, but he has a great story. So I would love to hear how you got into spirituality and in general, and just what kind of gave you the bug, the fever to get involved. I think just go for it.
Yeah, it's I kind of don't know my life without it. I'll be honest. As best as I can tell, what started it all is perhaps when I was 4 years old, my father died. Leading up to that, he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and went really quickly. He was a chiropractor and like an energy healer. By all accounts, from what I can tell, he took on a lot of people's energy. Even people claimed he cured their cancer and so on. But very much, I think, went to his head. And I think perhaps that led to his early death. I think he was 36. And when I was a child and he was quite sick, I jumped on him as the energetic child I was, and it hurt him. And he threw me across the room and I hit a wall or something. I don't remember this, but my mother grabbed me and packed me away, and we left him. And he died and I wasn't there. And it was interesting, though, going through my childhood. My father was, in a sense, a certain presence, but I had somehow convinced myself that I wasn't sad about it or had any sort of effects on me, right? And that said, when I look back on it, it had a very formative effect on me. I mean, I really thought about death a lot as a child. Seeing his naked body before it went into the crematorium, too, is an image that didn't come to me in its like profundity till I was an adult. But my mother is quite a spiritual person, kind of a natural psychic, artist, third generation fine artist in that family. Very, very attuned, very intuitive, and like wisdom would speak through her, and she could choose the right path between things, or would act as an amateur water witch and be spot on. And my grandmother, my father's mother, had that quality as well. And so I've been around a certain type of intuitive spirituality, but not a very deep one, from a young age. And the death of my father was a big formative effect, but there were others. And that was another big one. Was I was perhaps 6, and I saw I was playing on the top of the stairs, and I was a naughty little boy and had a Sharpie, and I was filling in goggles where, like safety goggles with the black ink. And I look down the stairs and I've got all this trash and stuff strewn on the stairs. And there's a cardboard tube at the bottom of the stairs. And it gently lifts off the ground and flies an arc up and lands at my feet. And it scared the bejesus out of me then. And I went running to my mother. And, you know, she believed me because she had seen many things like that herself in her life. But for me, the real shock with that was when I told other people about it, their reactions to me and how they had to dismiss my experience because it didn't fit into their conception of the world, right? And they come up with complicated, contorted explanations that weren't, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
To fit it into their worldview. And that also had a big influence in basically breaking down any hope of being able to believe in the materialistic narrative of the world.
Right.
And, you know, fast forward, you know, by the time I'm in puberty, you know, this kind of beautiful voice of the forest of that had been in me and connected with me in the life energy, you know, was starting to feel the pressure of the world, you know. And then I discovered drugs,
Right.
you know, hallucinogens and whatnot, and found you know, at 13, found a door back to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, shitty door.
Yeah.
You know, like, but I was struggling,
Yeah.
right? And I think by the time I was 15, I was starting to have these things where I'd go into my room and lie on the floor or sit on my knees and pray for an hour.
Mhm.
And it just got to the point where I'd be crying and banging my hands against the floor saying, you know, it's like, God, why are we apart?
Mm.
Like, I want to be with you. Come to me. Like, you know, this, I could feel this pain of the world trying to cleave this connection to my spiritual nature.
Right.
Not long after that, my stepfather started to go to a spiritual group in the Gurdjieff and John Bennett lineage.
Right.
And, you know, I had all these questions for him, you know, and I would pepper him with questions, and, you know, he would take it to his teacher, you know, and then eventually with enough telephone, this teacher said, Joel, just bring him here. It's like,
Yeah.
right? Don't, you know, and so I went and I met him, and John McPherson is his name, and an old Scottish guy.
Yeah.
And that at that very first meeting, there was this instant connection between us.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, Elijah, you know, I'll be your teacher, but you have to do two things. You have to quit the drugs and you have to go to college.
Wow. Wow.
And I said, yes. He's like, okay, and trust me to guard your spiritual nature.
Wow. Right. Right. Right.
And I said, okay. And I did exactly as he asked, actually.
Yeah.
I stopped doing drugs, just like completely cold turkey, you know, got rid of my, what is the Timothy Leary's book? The Psychedelic Experience.
Yeah.
And I enrolled in college.
Yeah.
And
where was it, Elijah? This was what were you were on
so
Bainbridge?
Yeah, I grew up on Bainbridge Island and then moved to Kingston. At
Yeah.
that time, I was living in Kingston, so I was taking the ferry over across the water, and
Yeah.
I enrolled in college at Edmonds Community College.
Okay. Right.
Um, I'd actually had dropped out of high school when we moved to Kingston and did this home study program where I was marginally studying, but mainly just
Yeah.
taking tests.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went, and so when I was in college, I was actively part of this group.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's a lot, it'll be a lot to describe all the practices,
Right.
in this particular lineage. But John came from the lineage of Gurdjieff and John Bennett, as well as a Sufi teacher named Hassan Susi,
Okay.
um, as well as he had a background in Socratic philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and we did a lot of uh, meditation exercises, spiritual exercises, spiritual dance, work meditation,
Right.
as well as one of the other means was something called the Thematic Method,
Yeah.
which is a bit, maybe harkens back to, you know, something pre-koan
Yeah.
like,
Uh,
where just koans made up on the fly involving people's lives
sure.
that
Sure.
you take home and work with and turn over.
Right.
Um, but that was really kind of my opening and start to the path. And so for me, it's kind of, I met him 25 years ago,
Yeah.
um, when I was 16.
Yeah.
And so I, I kind of don't know anything else
Yeah.
in a sense. And I never quite had that full shutdown, that full isolation from my spirit that some people have.
Right.
Um, Yet I had lots of challenges,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. 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 And how long, so you were there, you were with him, going to work with him for a long time, and then, I mean, do you still work with him?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I meet with him. Now it's basically I meet with him once a week.
Yeah. Wow.
He's up there in years, and it's like old friends meeting.
Yeah. Right.
Um, right. It's not, it's hard to give it words, right? Because our meetings are in this kind of timeless place,
Yeah.
even if we're just BSing.
Right. Right.
There's this other element beyond the words
Yes.
going on.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I've been working with him nonstop since then.
Yeah. Um, did anyone kind of take over like a lineage with that with him, or is there anything like that?
Well, I think me and another student are the only links from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, his focus, which is different than a lot of the traditions, and perhaps even the tradition he came from, of kind of what he viewed his life as bringing in, was about the collective,
Yeah.
about why we're out of touch with our spiritual nature. Why did that happen? And what could be the remedy at a collective level of the whole world?
Right.
That's kind of his special message that he brought in, and a lot of the teaching was focused on that,
Yes.
and helping me establish my own worldview,
Yeah.
or you could say mandala,
Right.
to fit in an answer to why even do these spiritual practices
Right.
in the first place.
Right. Right.
Um, so there's a lot of focus on that,
Yeah.
for many years, as well as work on values.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. 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 And then you kept going. How did you get to Japan? Where did that happen?
It's a funny story. So my initial connection to Japan is my aunt, my father's sister, married a Japanese man and had been living in Japan for a long time
Yeah.
and had a daughter there. So I had a family connection there, and I was always seeing him and all their friends, from a young age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, there's like a little bit of a connection there. And then when I was in college, though, as so many young people have this experience of you go to college and you're like, I don't have any idea what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Right? You have some initial ideas you brainstorm. Well, maybe psychology, right? Or I like this computer thing. What about computer science? And then the barriers start getting thrown up,
Uh-huh.
right? Or you try it out and you're like, I don't know if this is me,
Right.
right?
Sure.
And I was just totally beset. I have no idea what I'm going to do,
Yeah.
right? Initially I was thinking psychology. Um, Computer science seemed like a good idea, but I couldn't get the grades in math, and it was so hard to get into the program.
Right.
And then I was out on the lawn one day at the school and just looking at the light, the sunshine on the lawn. And it was like, it wasn't a voice per se, but it just came really strong. It's like, you're going to major in Japanese.
Oh, huh.
I just said, oh, okay. Almost every big decision in my life has come kind of like this.
Right.
And so I went back and told them I'd only taken 2 semesters of Japanese at this point.
Yeah.
And I believe I'd gone to Japan. Um, and I went to my Japanese teacher and I told her I'm going to major in Japanese. And she did everything she could to talk me out of it.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. She was a great person and really, really helpful, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
once I decided, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I went and I did my 3rd semester, but it was a year in between. So I had to study on my own
Yeah.
for a year in between.
Whoa.
And I did it. And then went to the University of Washington and put a tremendous amount of my focus and life energy into learning the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, it's a little hard to capture, but the work I was doing with John,
Yeah.
it was like he was helping me bring this lens
Yeah.
of spiritual effort into every aspect of my life, even the classes I was taking. Like, how do you use this life to train, right? How do you, even in this college class, what is there to take home, right? So everything, it became like this singular focus for me,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
learning the language. And I went on and um, got a scholarship to go do study abroad, um, doing a year exchange. And then I got a scholarship from the Monbusho later to
Yeah.
do research in grad school
Cool.
in Japan.
Cool. Cool. What's your degree? You have a degree in Japanese and then a graduate degree?
No, I went to grad school in Japan and realized that I just couldn't hack it in grad school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just not too much of a practitioner in
Right.
so many ways as a person. Um,
Yeah. 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 Yes. But something about Japan got in there.
yeah, there's a lot of karma there.
Yeah. Right.
I can't quite piece it all. Like, some of it was just this awkward guy who'd never been anywhere outside of the peninsula in Washington, really, and had this whole new global world open up to me. Um, and it was in Japan I learned how to be an adult.
Huh. Wow.
right? It's like the first time I really paid bills on my own
Yeah.
and functioned as a, you know, a creature on my own as an adult,
Yeah.
really was there.
Yeah.
And then became indoctrinated as a young adult by the people, the older adults around me about social behavior,
Yeah.
how to dress, how to act. And I had no structure like that.
Right.
No, I dressed horribly. I had no manners, right? No awareness of myself. And I got that from Japan. And I'm actually really, really grateful
Right.
for all this kind of harsh kindness
Yeah.
I got that for the most part didn't work. It just like was chipping off a boulder until eventually it eroded. Um,
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Where were you in Japan?
let's see, I first went there 1999 to 2000, 2001, and then came back for a year, and then went back at, let's see, 2003 to maybe 2005 or six.
Yeah. 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 And you were, where were you?
So in the, let's see, most of the time I was in the Tokyo area.
Yeah.
And then I had a brief period, about maybe a year or more in the Aichi area.
Okay. Okay. Right. 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 Um, and you got into martial arts and right?
Yeah, yeah, martial arts. I started in college. So
Yeah.
I started karate in college
Right.
with a friend who kind of started his own karate club at the University of Washington.
Yeah.
And I started because I was so uncoordinated. I had no idea, what was my left side versus my right side,
Yeah.
right? And I just knew my body needed an education.
Right.
My I was just so disconnected
Right.
from my body, and I was like, well, this is a good place to start.
Right.
And I kind of kept on it for quite a while, right? So it probably took me about 4 or 5 years of martial arts just to get the coordination of a normal person walking in the door. I'll be honest. Um, and then, yeah, and then I, joined dojos in Japan and the college karate dojo, and had many different experiences from, uh, very sports-like approaches to very martial approaches.
Yeah.
Um, wasn't until much later that I started an entirely different dojo that did karate and aikido. But I had been doing pieces of aikido through the years.
Yes. 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 And I think you've talked to me about how you felt like that karate and aikido was a way for you to use energy, use focus, and learn how to cultivate that and use that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It wasn't actually those martial arts where that started. It was in the Gurdjieff movements
Right.
that in that practice I did.
Right.
And that's where I initially learned how to bring a full embodiment in movement. And you would have these very complicated dances
Yeah.
that you would be doing where you would also need to be doing like processing numbers and counts, because you would have your hands doing this and your feet doing a different rhythm as your hands.
Oh,
And then you're moving and displacing on the ground. And sometimes you're saying things while you're doing it. So you have to be just so fully present in your body, in the moment.
yeah.
And then it's like, just as you find this tension in your shoulder or this movement you can't do, and it's connected to a trauma.
Yeah.
And as you work with it, and the whole thing blows open,
Yeah. Wow.
and then you proceed. And so that has this whole medium in the Gurdjieff movements
Yes.
that we worked with. Much later in martial arts, I was able to bring this into the dojo,
Yeah.
learning how to work with the energies of other people
Right.
and my own
Right.
creatively, and project energy, how to align my body with the ground and the energy of others, and feel and be sensitive to it.
Right.
But unfortunately, I don't think I had a martial arts teacher ever that was spiritually inclined.
Right. Right.
Um, so it was me that was bringing it into the environment
Right.
rather than receiving it as a teaching, so to speak.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Using it as a canvas for your own exploration.
yeah, yeah. And so that sensitivity I developed in spiritual practices, it's like, oh, here it is, in,
Yes.
in sticky hands,
Yeah.
here it is. Oh, why is it that I'm seeing this energy of this person projecting out of them
Right.
towards me in
Right.
this way? Like quite literally, visually, I would see this kind of
Yes.
almost like hallucination of the person
Yes.
projecting energy. And I was like, oh, that's their intention.
Right. 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 Right.
Right. And it, yeah, I had a lot of those kind of spooky experiences, but they're one-offs,
Yeah.
right? You can't phone them home. And but it was really helpful in grounding me, and just learn, and I mean quite literally learning how to put my feet on the ground,
Yeah. Right.
how to
Right.
move my hips,
Right.
right? How to align my body, how to align my breath with my body,
Yes.
project my energy into the world,
Yes. Yes.
even socially.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
I kind of just mentally lump it into that whole education about being a human I got in Japan,
Right.
um,
Right.
that I didn't quite get here.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get interested in Zen then?
That's a great question. So I'd been interested in Zen for quite a while. So after I met John, he had kind of a reading list he put us through. And one of the books, I think I have it next to me here somewhere. Oh no, it's on the different bookshelf. But it's the Three Pillars of Zen. It's probably like you talk to anybody who has been connected to Zen within a certain strata of generations, and there's like everybody was pulled by that book. But I read it and I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
this sounds amazing.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And probably what really resonated though was at the end of the book, the real people's enlightenment experiences.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than just some sort of like mythological figure of some unobtainable person like guru, right? These are just real people.
Right. Right.
And so reading that, and then, starting to speak some Japanese and having been in Japan,
Yeah.
it really planted a seed. And when I met the first Zen monk I met,
Yeah.
was at a sub-temple of the Daitokuji called the Daisen. And here I got something on my wall. I'll pull that. I was in Japan. I was like, gosh, I must have been 18 when me and my cousin are there, and we're walking around this beautiful rock garden, and this monk walks up to us, and he points at us, and he says, "You're famous," in English. And both my cousin and I are like, what? He's like, and he heard us say, what? And he's like, yeah, because I've never met you.
Wow.
And then I I got to meet him, and apparently this guy is rather famous. So, I mean, they're like, you go and you search for his name on Google, there's this massive list of people who've had these interesting encounters with him at this temple, right? And he sells his poetry there, to help supporting the temple. And, I was like, hey, will you sell me your poetry and talk, and he did. And this is probably one of his most famous things in English, his
Right.
poems.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Right. Right. Right.
Solon Ozeki is his name.
Yeah. Wow.
And he's just this really cool, down-to-earth
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And he's often on Japanese television. I don't think so much now in his advanced age,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he wrote this book called Anyone Can Die Skillfully.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And he talks about his wife's death and death and people in his life.
Wow.
And he actually did a whole convention called like Anyone Can Die Skillfully.
Yeah.
And, very community engaged
Yeah. Yeah.
with the broader society in Japan.
Yeah.
A real neat, loving man.
Yeah. Right.
Solon Ozeki, but his presence really kind of.
Was it, did you find it, in terms of in Japanese standards, did you find him just like, an alien? Was it like that? Was it like there are Japanese people and then there's this person and this person is like completely different? What was it like for you? What was that like?
I mean, his presence was just ordinary and loving.
Right. Right.
Right. It
Right.
wasn't. It was a different presence than some of the shike I've met.
Yeah.
Right. He was an ordinary,
Yeah.
loving person who brought that love into the encounters he met.
Yeah.
Of the people he met. Right.
Yeah. 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 Um, Beautiful. And how about these shike? And can you tell us what shike is? Because I think some of our viewers won't know what that is.
Yeah. So shike is the head instructor of a monastery. So this is what most people call roshi, but it's a pretty high standard, right? So the roshi can sometimes is conflated with a very, very senior teacher,
Right.
right? But perhaps doesn't have the stamp of approval of the organization they're in. Right. And so there's a bit more fuzziness in that label where
Yes.
shike is an official title.
Yes.
And there's, I think at any given time, like no more than like 17 shike or something in Japan. There's not many.
Right. It's crazy to get that. It's like the number of calligraphies there. It's like that. You need to do all this red tape to really do it, and it's impossible almost for most. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique thing, actually.
Right. Right.
But yeah, my first time practicing Zen was in the United States.
Okay.
I met Genjo Marinawa with Choboji.
Sure.
I connected with them in Seattle.
Yeah.
And that was in my gap year between times in Japan. And that had a really profound effect in my life.
Yeah.
Was doing sesshin. The energetic experience that is sesshin was a whole new animal.
Okay.
Compared to the work that I'd done with my teacher, John.
Right.
It was like everything was applicable.
Yeah.
And the education I got in energies and maintaining them and the physicality of it and how they progress and build.
Yes.
I mean, was all so applicable when I went into sesshin. It was kind of like I knew the general structure of the building going in.
Yes.
But I was totally unprepared with the hours.
Yes.
And the singular focus.
Right.
And
right.
yeah, that was big.
Right, right. And just for people listening, like a week-long retreat, something like that. When you first start doing this, it's just insurmountable. The idea that you would be sitting all day, every day for a week. You, you know, our brains can't even really process that. So we have to kind of think, well, I can get through this hour, you know, I can get through this hour and then maybe I can get through the next hour. And you think, I've got 6 more days of this after that, or you get to day 3 or 4 and you're just, you can't go forward. It's impossible. And you've still got these days forward. It's very strange, very strange.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could say I went with that level of trepidation into it.
Yeah.
I was one of these crazy people that was like, I don't know. I had so many times before session where I was like, well, I'm just going to lock myself in this room until I become enlightened.
Right. Right.
Right. And ultimately, something caught up with me and I'm like, no, it didn't happen. I got to get out of this room.
Right. Right.
I'm
Right.
just going to sit here until it happens. Because as you hear those stories, was it
Yeah.
the one they tell at Rohatsu about Hakuin, is it Hechida? I forget the name of the man who locks himself in the bathhouse
Right.
until he
Right.
has Satori, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so I was kind of inspired by these grand stories so many times. So, I was like full of gumption going into my first session, which was actually Rohatsu.
Well, yeah, that's a big leap. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
um, Great. Wow. Um, okay. And can you say some more about Zen? I'd like to hear that more of
I
your
mean,
process.
and so it was actually that session where the seed started to the seed had been planted, but what do you call it, a shoot went up.
Mhm.
And the first night of Rohatsu, I'm at the bell. That feeling where you're staring at the bell, you're the one up and you're listening for the bell, right?
I've
And
I've heard of that.
you've heard of that. And I'm sitting there and just, I don't know what comes over to me, but I just start praying to myself. I'm just like, God, give me the honesty to just be as honest as I can be. And I just kept repeating over and over in me, just be as honest as you can be. Um, just asking, pleading
Yeah.
any deity that would listen
Yeah.
to let me through. Right, let honesty through. And bell rings, I hear you, I go in, give some totally shitty answer, and I'm ready to be rung out. And then I go, wait, no ring, I got a question. And I say, who am I before I was born and after I did? And I don't get the full die out. I just did. And then the whole universe imploded in an instant. Just everything. And I just erupt in tears. Right. And we say some words and I go back to my cushion. And then that was the start of the Rohatsu, and probably the least remarkable thing that had happened uh, compared to the next days that proceeded.
Yeah.
But it was enough. Maybe I should go a little bit into what happened next, and it
Sure.
might be a bit odd. I don't have any idea where this falls in the orthodoxy, but hey, but it became increasingly clear through the process of Doksan that there was very much trauma holding me up from even being able to do proper koan work. And it became clear that it was my father, my death of my father that had been unresolved.
Right.
And that became my koan at this Rohatsu. And it's hard to describe the energetic release that happened in that first day, but it was akin to, like, I must have got a massive dose of meth, because, like, I would sit through 3 or 4 breaks and barely slept at all, and just had this massive ability to go through the pain and everything in a way that hasn't happened since, right? You talk about these carrots, right? But it was much needed for this thing with my father, right? And it was, this whole thing opened up to me about time and space and healing the world.
Yeah.
And how my father died not having his son there,
Right.
not being able to express his love to his son,
Right.
right? And an immense amount of suffering.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And there was something very real connecting. I mean, to me, in my consciousness, it was, I was able to go there in time and be at the side of his bed when he died,
right,
and make contact with him,
right,
and heal that moment where the universe had been ripped asunder,
right,
with a very profound wound.
right.
And that the means of session, the whole energetic thing that had been built and everything, allowed that to be possible, because I was not in a station where I could do such a thing.
Right.
Right. It in a sense gave me a state far beyond the station I was in.
Right.
To have that effect on my life and heal it.
Right.
And it really changed everything, right, for me, that particular session.
Yeah.
That happened, and then the last day, from the lack of sleep, I didn't sleep for 2 or 3 days. I started to hear voices.
Yeah, right.
And the whole energy and everything inverted on itself. And I'm like, I go into Dokes and I'm like, are you telepathically in my head?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm not sending you waves.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm just hallucinating.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah. So that was big.
Yeah.
And that was the start of my connection to Zen.
Right. Right. Love it. Love it. Thank you. Okay, I think why don't we just talk a little bit about, I think it'd be interesting for people to hear your ideas on kind of big picture stuff, like what's the take home from this for you? I think that's something that you have some things to say about that. What's the take home for, your thoughts on the world, society, all of that? Please.
That's a lot, right? You could say, all I know is really just this right now, this moment. That's all I really know. But this mind and has images and kind of its own software, right? And over the years of working with teachers, I feel like I've been able to piece together a useful mandala that's helped guide my life and put things in context that I think may be useful to others. And, once you start asking this amazing question, why? In fact, that was like my daughter's third word.
Yeah. I know.
In Japanese, she just kept saying, Nanda, 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 like pointing at everything.
Oh, man.
Like, but you start asking why, like, why is there ignorance? I don't feel like Buddhism, I'm sure there's people who can answer this better than me, but personally, I don't feel like I've heard a good answer from Buddhism about why there's ignorance, right? Although why is a tricky question. I mean, it gets you caught up in the causation of the conceptual mind.
Right.
But I mean, in a practical way, like, why are we living in this society that's hierarchical, that we order people, if this person's better than that person,
Right.
right?
Right.
Why are we not able to correct our behavior collectively? And we're running on this crash course to, an ecosystem collapse that won't be able to support our own species. Why? Like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
um, it's human beings have been around for what? Homo sapiens sapien, modern humans, for 300,000 years. This topsy-turvy society has been around for 15,000 years. For the majority of our time as a species, we've been in homeostasis, in relative harmony with our environment and with each other. But something happened. What happened?
Mhm.
And then this is the teaching I've received from John and worked on myself, filling in.
Yeah.
And somewhere around 15,000 years ago, we walked into something like, you go and step in dog shit, right? There's something we stumbled in. And at some point, we lost an integration with our spiritual nature, right? That when people went through adolescence, they were able to keep that connection intact to a point, at least to the point where they knew they could go out and have a vision quest and connect with their wisdom and bring it back to influence their behavior and their interaction with others. I'm not saying that, in those societies, everything was all perfect.
Sure.
They certainly didn't have modern medicine, and I'm sure immense amounts of suffering.
Right.
But there's a fundamental difference, right? People were living as humans, but we had a regression to, a society of baboons, essentially, right? And we've been living in the consequences of that since then. Perhaps the origin was once groups of people became larger than, say, 150, 250 people. People's minds couldn't but help to start to treat groups of people as a conceptual object and started to objectify people as groups. Perhaps that's why, um,
Right.
but the reality is that something changed
Mhm.
fundamentally
Yeah.
at that time. And since then, since that change, we've really been in an awful place as a species. I mean, we've had leaders at the top of societies manipulate images, propaganda, storytell, and people just passive to those manipulations of images. And you have groups of people at the top that are able to whip up everybody and send them off to war, to go kill members of their own species, which is just the most nuts thing you can imagine. War,
Right.
right? It's slavery. I mean, you've got all the ills of society that we know, started 15,000 years ago. Yet we also see the emergence of the great teachings.
Right.
Um, One of the first we know of is Zoroaster.
Right.
Choose truth, not the lies, is one of the sayings attributed to him. Um, you know, and he taught a message fundamentally that everybody had innate wisdom and they knew what was right, right? Um, they knew the difference.
Yeah.
Um, Later, you see Buddhism emerge, Christianity, many, many teachings, but I look at them as all trying to correct this trajectory that started when we collectively lost touch with our spiritual nature. And then that became an inherent part of how we operated and became unconsciously passed down through the generations, right? It's not something genetic in us,
Right.
but rather a socialized, energetic transmission of trauma across generations. And these great teachers and these great teachings and practices are actively looking at transforming the world. You know, they're transforming each of our lives and radiating energy through our lives out into the past and the future is how I see it. And really the reality is humans, unless we change, you know, as a species, we're done for. You know, there may be a small group of 100 people hanging out like cockroaches, you know, but we'll destroy the only world we have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why, you know, be it Zen, be it Christianity, whatever is an active, real, experiential, transformative practice, the real Dharma entering people's lives,
Right.
has that effect. And it's like a society needs a certain percentage of people that the Dharma has touched to even keep functioning.
Right.
Um,
Right.
if there's not enough people and everybody's asleep,
Right.
it just inverts on itself.
Right.
Um, and so it's like every time you sit down to do zazen or meditate, it's actually a revolutionary act,
Right.
right? You're choosing the truth.
Right.
You're choosing this wisdom that is beyond the conceptual mind. It can't be touched by propaganda, right? It's a real freedom
Right.
that is entering into you in the moment
Right.
and is acting as a corrective on the course of human history.
Right.
And it's like we don't often realize how we're creating the universe as people.
Mm-hmm.
But this is our little piece of creation and this body, right? That we can't, it's huge. Each
Right.
one of us is like an atom bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, so that's a kind of a taste of the vision, you know, from my first teacher, and
Yeah.
uh, it kind of colors everything I do. And you know, there isn't much of this that I've experienced in Zen, but I do think that all the Zen teachers I've met are connected with this and have a level of understanding with it. It's just not the same image I'm articulating, and that's okay, right? But
Right. 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 No, thank you. Thank you for that. I think I think that'll be food for thought, I think, for some people. What else? What's our closing message? What's our closing anything we would like to add today? What are you interested in now? Stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, right now for me, kind of just the theme is just using this moment, seeing that this is all that I have. There's no other world, right? People say this kind of thing so often, especially in the beginning of the path. You hear it, be present, da da da. And it's kind of like how world peace becomes world peace,
Yeah.
right? This disease of cynicism enters and corrupts a pure message that if you really could see it, is so transformative.
Right.
But really, this right now,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
is so deep,
Yeah.
right? That there's so much more going on than our conceptual mind.
Right.
We're we were born and out of the very raw elements of the earth, you know, unfolded like a flower. And just for this moment, we have some conceptual mind and sense of self, but it's just a minor function
Right.
in this organism we are and what we participate in. So that's been what's going on for me. And, if I was going to just say something to everyone, it's just choose the truth opposed to lie, right? At every part of your life, you know, connect with the truth.
Yeah.
You all have the capacity to see it.
Yeah. 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 Love it. Okay. All right. Beautiful. I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up. I think an hour is pretty good for timing. Um, thank you so much, Elijah. What's your Dharma name again?
Saigon.
Sagan, like in in the four vows, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story. I think it will be very helpful. So, and your presence is, I think that presence can be transformative. So, I think people will get something out of it. So thank you. Thanks so
Yeah.
much. Okay.
Thank you, Corey.
Okay. You're so welcome. Okay. See you soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.